My overall takeaway, Stephen A., is Carmelo's a good dude. That's how he comes across. A guy who's being honest about what he's going through, and he deserves to be commended for that. But a guy who's still not being fully honest with himself about where he fits into the game.
Well, here's where I'm at with it. I think that I appreciate your perspective, but I think you've missed a couple of points there. Number one, let's understand what the ultimate incentive was for Carmelo Anthony to call ESPN and to ask to do the interview, because he wanted to make sure people understood he wasn't looking for a farewell tour. He wants to get back playing, and he's willing to come off the bench. And other people were speaking out on his behalf without his knowledge, without his permission, whether it would be Chauncey Billups, whether it would be his trainer, Chris Brickley, or anybody else for that matter, former teammates and what have you. Like he told you, he went dark. From the time that he got let go by Houston 10 games into the season, he hadn't spoken to anyone. I knew that for a fact because for the first time in his career, he and I go back 15 years. For the first time in 15 years, I couldn't reach him. Today was the first time, Max, I had spoken to Carmelo Anthony, with the exception of being at D. Wade's retirement celebration at the end of the season. That's the only time that I had seen Carmelo Anthony other than today. He went dark. So that's number one. Number two, in terms of the politics, let's understand, he was on the record saying, I got to be careful about what I say because I'm still trying to play in the NBA. I'm still trying to be on a team. And if I delve into that, I may not get a job. He said it on the air. He said it on the record. So it wasn't like the question wasn't asked. You know, you are right when you point out that he's being honest. You are right and when you point out that he's being honest and open about how he feels. But in terms of getting into the weeds of what he thinks or alluding to what other teams may be saying about him, there's no way on earth he's going to win by bringing that up if he's trying to get back into the league. And so I thought that he was very transparent in what he was saying in that regard. And he clearly was transparent about the fact that he thinks he's gotten a bad rap in terms of an unwillingness to come off the bench. What did he say on numerous occasions, Max? He said, nobody approached me about coming off the bench. Billy Donovan told me what my job description was going to be, that I was going to be a fourth option. Houston never had a conversation with me about coming off the bench. And then he talked about what – I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's my point, though. No kidding, Carmelo, you have to accept coming off the bench. Like, he needed to accept that 3 years ago and do it with a full heart, not grudgingly. So at this point,
wait a minute, Max. Wait a minute, Max. Here's the important distinction that I want you to get before you continue. What you're talking about, he's supposed to get. He's saying, I would have gotten it if somebody said something, but they weren't coming to me with that.
Right, but
so if they're not telling me that, then it's a problem.
But what I'm saying is, what he did in Oklahoma City when Billy Donovan said, this is your role, he didn't do well enough to get the minutes he was getting on an NBA level. He was a bad catch and shoot three-point shooter, which is what they really need for him. And since he's never been a defender, so what does he do well enough to actually deserve those minutes? What I'm saying about Carmelo, it's not like fair to him. This is just the way it happened. What he did was highly valued in a previous NBA. But in this NBA, if you can't still do that on an MVP or at least an all-star level, be an ISO scorer that can carry a team, then you have to be a specialist in something. He is not a specialist catch and three-point shooter. He is not a specialist, obviously, defender. So he's best suited for a certain number of minutes off the bench as the focal point of a second unit or as maybe the second focal point of a second unit.
So if that is so, Max, do you believe that there's a justification at this particular juncture based on what you just described, not taking anything else into consideration? If Carmelo Anthony was willing to come off the bench, looking at the rosters that you see on an NBA squad, do you think there's justification for him not to have an NBA job at this moment in time?
Yes, but this is it's all Carmelo still. This is what I mean is a level of self-awareness for Carmelo. If I'm a GM and I hear that interview, I see a good guy and a guy who's trying to be honest, but a guy who hasn't fully realized the way he could be best used on a team or what his job would actually be. He still has the ego and the mentality and entitlement of a superstar who's now kind of like magnanimously accepting this lesser role. And if I'm a GM, I'm thinking, why do I need to deal with that? I want a guy who's like, okay, fine, whatever you need. And I could tell him, like, look, you're a 15-minute-a-game player. You're going to be the second there's no such thing as really a third unit, but a scorer
that's what he said.
Off the bench, and maybe not the primary
That's
one.
what he said. He said he had expressed himself as a person that was willing to do whatever you need, just tell me. So if that's the truth, then that is a different narrative than what has been put out there about him, if you believe him. If you believe him, then he has been lied on by a lot of people.
But Stephen A., do you believe that? Do you believe him when he says that?
Yeah, I believe him. I believe him because I've known him for years. I believe it. I'm not. Listen, if he said it wouldn't have been hard, oh, please, no big deal, I would have accepted it. I'd tell him, right? I'd have told him on national television he lying through his teeth because I know how difficult that would be. But I know that D. Wade had discussions with him about it. I know that Chris Paul had discussions about it. Chris Paul had a discussion with him about it when he arrived in Houston.
So why
you are going to play a lesser role.
Listen,
that is going to be the case.
He's not in the league for a reason. And what I'm telling you is, if I'm a GM, I could see it. It's like he wants to do the right thing, but there's still a gap in his understanding of how good he is and how good he actually is and how good he thinks he is.
Fair.
Still. There's still a gap there.
That's fair. And here's my closing remark.
Well, we do have to
there are too many damn scrubs. There are too many damn scrubs in the NBA for Carmelo Anthony not to be in an NBA.
And by the way, my prediction is he will have a job in the NBA, partly because of that interview.
It is now up to him to convince a GM that he can accept a lesser role. That's something we will see if it will indeed come to fruition. Stephen A., really amazing interview. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.